he has spoken on the topics faith, family and freedom in Cuba, Belgium, Brazil, Congo, UK and all over to crowds from 14 to 40,000. International leadership speaker, trainer and coach. Author of Learn to Raw Leadership, Attitude Hack, Live a More Excellent Life, 5 Battle Strategies of a Victorious Warrior. 2021 President's Lifetime Achievement Award recipient. Founding partner of the John Maxwell team. Toastmaster International Speech Competition semi-finalist. Founder of Tell It Like It Is TV, ThatGuyRocks.com and ThatGuySpeaks.com. Creator of Story Power TV, Transforming Grace TV, and Leading Leaders Podcast. Producer of 4 TV programs and podcasts for Liftable TV and World Trumpet Television as well as multiple social media channels. Please help me welcome J. Loren Norris.
There was a time when I remember a guy telling me, yeah, I can sing. And I was like, okay, well, I grew up in middle school choir and high school choir and performing choir, and I've traveled around, around Central Texas singing with the choir. So show me how well you can sing. And then he harmonized with a lawnmower in the parking lot where the guy was doing the lawn around our building. And I thought to myself, well, I thought I could sing. But this guy is doing first, thirds, and fifths with a lawnmower. He doesn't just have the ability to make a sound with his throat. He has perfect pitch. His ear hears the sound at every level, and he can mimic it. I thought I could sing. I was wrong. A lot of people think they can communicate, and they're just as wrong. But that's what I want to talk about in this episode of Leading Leaders.
Subscribe now for our extensive video library of leadership lessons promoting faith, family, and freedom.
I'm J. Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast, and I can tell you I've watched a lot of people take the platform, get on a podcast interview, jump up on a stage, and ramble for a period of time. 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 20 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour and a half. And sometimes what they say is like a one-track mind. It sounds like well, it sounds like when you put too many clothes in the washing machine and it gets off balance and it's kind of go thump, 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 thump. There's a rhythm to it, but it's not a pleasant rhythm. Or when you put tennis shoes in the dryer, you can tell that there's a sound there, but it's not consistent. It's not even a rhythm. It's just a tumbling noise. There are a lot of people who communicate that way because the word choices that they make and the emotional appeal that they try to craft and the persuasion that they want to draw you in with, their sales pitch, their salesmanship, so to speak, it all kind of has its own individual melody. Each one has a different drum beat, so to speak, a different rhythm, a different means of communicating. And a lot of people try to throw all of those tools, tricks, tips, techniques into one presentation without asking, how do you make them work together? I remember the first time Willie Hood was showing me his bass guitar. Now, I knew him from drama class. I knew he was a fantastic artist. I didn't know that he played any instruments. And he picked up his bass guitar and he turned on a song that we were all familiar with. This was back in the early 80s. And he started banging on his bass guitar. And he was hitting all the notes in the song that I honestly thought, when I listened to the song before, when I crank it up in my car, that those were drum beats. And he would hit them with his bass. And I was like, I didn't know that instrument made that sound. I thought that sound was coming from a drum. And it was mind-boggling for me as I watched him very artistically create. Now, I also watched him hit the sustain and, hit a note and it would just kind of hum in the background from that bass. But it wasn't just a hit. It was a hit and a resonate that would sustain for a moment, like someone great on a keyboard or an organ might do. They hit that note and it holds, and then they hit all the flowery notes around it, and the melody comes together and the harmonies come together, and what's meant to be in unison, what's meant to be in harmony, they know where they belong in the music. Great leadership communication does the same thing, but it doesn't quite sound the same. Let me ask you this. Have you ever been to a symphony or a concert? And if you play bass guitar, when you hear the bass or you hear the cello or you hear something that mimics that kind of quality in the music bed, when you hear it, you think, I know what that is. It almost like your brain singles out that sound, that pitch, that tone, that process. Well, the same thing happens when a great communicator, who also has a great vocabulary, inserts those words with deep meaning into what would seem to be a very normal text. In the process of that conversation, when all of a sudden you think, it seems to me like the only thing playing is that one fiddle, that one saxophone, that one trumpet or trombone, and you realize that everyone else in the room is hearing everything that you're hearing, but there's a chance that their ear is not quite tuned to the thing that your ear is tuned to. Not that note, not that instrument, not, oh wow, that note was a little sour, that note sounded like maybe it was a little flat. That one note from that one instrument out of the 65 that are on the stage, because your ear is tuned to that thing. My uncle, all of his life, he's gone now, but all of his life was a mechanic. From the time he was 15 or 16 years old, at one point in his life, he was the master mechanic who instructed the GM mechanics school. If you were a GM Goodwrench mechanic, he was one of your instructors. He was that good. And I know there were times that I would hear something in my engine that to me sounded a little off. I just didn't know what that sound was. And there was a time that I thought my old Chevy had a rod knocking, because it had that slapping kind of a sound in it, and it was coming from the bottom of the engine, and I was really worried that I was going to have to rebuild the whole motor. And my uncle walked out and he stood next to it for about 30 seconds, and he goes, "That's not a rod, that's an exhaust leak." I'm like, how do you know that? You didn't pick up a single tool, you didn't put it on a lift, you didn't even open the hood, you just stood beside it. He said, when you know what you're listening for, you'll know what it is. I said, so how do I fix it? He said, well, you're probably going to have to go buy a new donut. You're going to have to drop the exhaust off and put new donuts on both sides of the manifold and then bolt the exhaust back up. And that's going to take a minute because you never get them just quite right. You probably need some extra hands under there, but I'm not doing it, so get your friend over here. And he was right. $3 worth of donuts on each side. Not Krispy Kremes, like the little ceramic donuts with the asbestos around the, that's the way we used to do it. But those little donuts, they went between the exhaust manifold and the exhaust downpipe. And if they got old, if they got dry rotted, which mine did, and they started falling through the exhaust, the air would come out between the manifold and the exhaust. And it was air that was supposed to come out of the engine, but it wasn't supposed to come out there. And that's very much like that communication when someone is a little off kilter in their own psyche. They're a little off kilter in their own emotional stability. They're a little off kilter in the way they perceive the world. And when they communicate, often the emotional dysrhythmia sounds like shoes in a dryer. Sounds like an exhaust leak. Sounds like the washing machine out of balance. It sounds like you can hear there's something wrong, you just don't know what it is. Great communication, on the other hand, sounds like that symphony. It's prepared every piece at every level. It's all the right words with just the right depth of vocabulary, just the right meaning. It's the kind of thing that stirs your soul. You feel the chills down the spine. They start at the top of your hair and then work down your neck, and you're just like, yeah, like that. And something in your soul buys in to the words that are being spoken. Something in your intellect is stimulated and you think, man, I hope I remember what they just said. That was so powerful. You're taking notes and writing quotes and holding on to these words that are being shared because they're inspiring you and they're motivating you. And then if a great communicator takes that kind of detailed attention to the crafting of their speech, then they deliver it with the same level of intensity and drama and the right pace and the right rhythm. Then you'll also realize there are things that they wrote into that speech that you weren't quite ready for yet. I mean, not today. Maybe your soul was, but your mind wasn't quite there yet. And here's what happens. You've heard me talk about the grass burrs and the whiskers, how my puppy goes out and she gets caught up in these burrs and she comes back and you can't just brush them out or even comb them out. You have to one by one pull little hairs out because that burr is stuck deep. It's there for a purpose. It's a seed. And so God made it to travel a long distance, and it'll hold on until you intentionally take it out. And sometimes a great communicator will embed an idea into a story in a way that today you're not quite ready for it, or today your knowledge isn't there. Today your experiences don't line up enough for you to go, I love that notion, I get that. In fact, today, that grasper, that notion, that idea, that element of the story, that part that pricks your conscience and makes you go, oh, no, I don't like it. Don't even talk about that in front of me. I'm triggered by that. Today, it triggers you. 6 months from now, you realize, wow, I really needed that. And as you're pulling that apart, you see the seed of that story embedded deeply in the moment. And as it begins to come to light, it begins to bear fruit in a new way. And you think to yourself, how did that happen? Well, it's because that master communicator was able to embed that idea into a story that you thought was an innocuous story. You didn't think anything about it. And 3 months later, 6 months later, you realize, I needed that. I wasn't ready for it then, but I needed it. And now I know what to do with it. I actually got that client call from someone. We'd done coaching together months previous. And she sent me a text and she said, hey, is your wife around? Can I call you? And so, yeah, she happens to be in the office with me. And yes, you can call me. This was pretty late in the evening after standard business hours anyway. And so she called me and I put her on speakerphone. And she said, I just want you to know, you've been teaching me about that grasper thing, about that seed that kind of sticks in. And I didn't even get it at the time that you taught it to me. I didn't understand what you meant by that. But something recently happened that reminded me of something else that you said. And I thought, I wouldn't have heard that then. I mean, I did hear it. I mean, it did mean something to me. It just didn't mean to me then what it means to me now. I said, well, maybe you've heard that old phrase, when the student is ready, the teacher will come. She said, yeah, I hear that all the time. I just don't know when the teachers are going to come into my life. I said, maybe our Western culture has us looking at that backwards. Maybe we think the teacher will arrive, will appear, will suddenly manifest out of nowhere when the student needs the answer. Maybe it's the other way around, that the teacher's already embedded the answer. The teacher's already deposited that wisdom in you. But it's not receivable by you until you're ready. It's like a trust fund. It's waiting for that trigger, that birthday, that moment in time, that other event, that incident. And in that moment, that deposit, that trust fund, that money that's been waiting on you, that investment in you that came to you through this master communicator, it's been sitting idle in your soul. It's been waiting down deep in your subconscious. And when the moment comes, it's ignited. It's like a time bomb of knowledge. It's waiting for the right time to explode into your mind and your emotions and ignite something new in you. See, the master communicator, the leadership communicator that understands that I'm not talking to one person. I've always been fascinated by pastors of large churches. I don't care which church, I don't care what denomination, that's not relevant. Here's what's relevant. When a professor or a teacher teaches in a classroom, odds are you're in that classroom, whether it's because of your age or because of your progression in that collegiate endeavor, right? So if you're a third grader taking third grade math, the smartest person in the room, hopefully is the teacher or the teacher's aide, but the next smartest person in the room is a third grader. Everything they know about math, they learned in grade 1 and 2. How much do they know? And so when you're teaching to a third grade class, you teach third grade math, and pretty much everybody is on the same level of understanding and comprehension. The further you get maybe into high school, that's why we have AP math and regular math, and then special needs. But by third, fourth, fifth grade, that's all pretty much the same. So the teacher teaching that class is, well, they're teaching third graders. They're communicating on a third grade level with third grade information. Or you move into college and you may have people of different ages. They're not all 17 or 19 or 22 years old. Maybe some are older, maybe some are younger. But in second year psychology, you're teaching second year psychology. And there's some base understandings that that group of people ought to have, and some things that you're challenging and pushing and pulling and moving them forward through, and that's fine. But they're second year psychology students. That's what they expect to get from you. But the pastor of a large church, say 200 people. 200 people are sitting in that congregation, and some of them may be retired from your job. They did your job longer than you've been alive, and now they're sitting in your audience. And if you think for 1 second they're not evaluating every word you say, the way you say it, how you articulate it, the stories that you choose, the verses that you choose, the context of what you've written into your message, well, you're mistaken, because they are. But at the same time, you've got people who are, yesterday they didn't even want to go to church. And today they've been drugged to church. They got a drug problem. They're drugged to church today. And now they're sitting here and they're thinking, well, in my business, I would never talk to somebody like that. In my business, because the only scale of understanding they have is the life they've lived up to this point. And if they've never had exposure to this kind of teaching or this kind of content, you've got your work cut out for you. You've got second year psychology students and third grade math students in the same room at the same time, and you've got to be able to communicate in a way that both of them get something of value out of it. That's the symphony. That's the ability to touch the soul on one level and the spirit on another level, the intellectual mind on another level, the subconscious mind on another level, and simultaneously deliver something that's at least entertaining enough that people who are sitting in the audience go, yeah, I'm going to pay attention and not sleep. I'm going to pay attention and not be on my cell phone. I'm going to stay engaged in what you have to say because it sounds to me like it might be important. And in that moment, that symphonic value of a great story embedded in a great lesson, teaching something that holds in the heart. The listener walks away and thinks, well, that one story about this was really good, but that other story, that didn't mean anything to me at all. Until 3 months later, 6 months later, and then it dawns on him. They were right. I don't like that what they said was true, but turns out it is. And see, the expert communicator, the master communicator, the leadership communicator who spends the time studying the hearer, the listener, the audience, that is concerned about their needs, not just I need to get in front of the crowd and tell my story. I need to get in front of the crowd and convey my ideas because my ideas are important. Now, what's really important is the transformation in the life of the person who needs your help. And they're here for that. Even great comedians who understand that my job on this stage is to perform in a way that makes you laugh. My job is to make you laugh. As a comedian, that's my purpose. That's why I'm here. That's why you bought a ticket. That's why you're sitting in the audience. That's why you attended, was to laugh. And anything that I do that doesn't make you laugh, well, you're not getting your money's worth. But listen to some of the greatest communicators of all time, and they use humor as a pathway to deposit ideas that you may not be ready for just yet. If you think I'm kidding, go back and watch some old George Carlin. George Carlin was funny. A lot of it had to do with his facial expressions. A lot of it had to do with the antics of the way that he delivered a message. But he challenged people in their own business beliefs. their own psychology, their own relationships, in their own politics. He challenged the government from the stage in front of a crowd, crowds of thousands who paid him to be funny. And he made them think at the same time. That's the symphony. The ability to go back even now and look at some of George Carlin's old stuff and go, holy cow, he was right way back then about what's going on now. It was almost like he was a seer who could see the future before it got here. But his ability to articulate that with a little bit of humor, with a whole lot of art, with a great level of intellect, allowed some people to hear those parts of the story, to think through those thoughts and notions, to consider those ideas that otherwise would have just made them mad. They would have had no desire to ponder those notions prior. If you went to them and said, I want to talk to you about this, they'd have been like, who are you and why do you think I want to hear what you have to say? Who are you to even talk about that subject? You're not an expert in this. You're not a biologist or an economist. I don't even want to hear it. You're not a scientist at all. And yet, George Carlin's comedic ability to deliver some profound thinking. Bill Maher is not quite on that level, but he's getting there. Joe Rogan definitely has punched through that level of communication. And a lot of it has to do with the type of people that he has on his podcast and the conversations that he has and the things that he studies. And when he gets curious about something, he just doesn't let it go. And in his own words, he said, I watch a whole lot of stuff on social media that is absolutely useless. And from time to time, I'll find a gold nugget. And that gold nugget becomes an entire series or punchline of jokes in my set. And I couldn't live without them. I couldn't do my job without them. They're that powerful. They're that deep. And sometimes it's just the stupidity of other humans that becomes the punchline. Great communicators listen to the audience. Great communicators study the audience. They ask the question, what do they need and how do I deliver it to them? And then they understand that, like many crowds, not everybody is a third grade math student and not everybody is a second year psychology student. And you've got to be able to bridge the gap between them. You also have to come to the desk, come to the table, come to the podcast mic, come to the stage with content that's valuable to the third grade math student and the second year psychology student or the professor, because they're going to be in the room too. And if you think that I'm only speaking to my niche and so the people in my audience are going to be exactly my ideal clients, well, the odds that that's going to happen are pretty slim, number one. Number two, understand that even in your ideal market, you're going to have those people at various levels of education, various levels of experience, various levels of relational equity, various levels of understanding, various levels of vocabulary, of emotional wellness, of emotional stability. And if you're not delivering something for all of them in the content that you're delivering, then your shoes in the dryer and not a symphony. I challenge you as a communicator to take the time to deliver those stories that are so well integrated with the teaching points that you're making that they're hard to distinguish the teaching points from the story. I call those connecting words. In my one-on-one coaching sessions with my clients, we very intentionally take their teaching words and move them back into the stories. If you'd like to learn how to do that, you can go to storypowercoach.com and schedule a session. If you would really like to master some time in this, you can go to storypoweracademy.com and check out all the various levels of engagement that are available. In October, we'll start our one-on-one coaching calls and our Q&A calls for those that are in the academy. We'll be doing monthly Q&A calls for those that are a part of that. If learning to communicate like a symphony and not like shoes in the dryer is something that's important to you, I would love to engage. But I'm going to tell you right now, if you are a communicator and you haven't thought through all the different types and levels of understanding and types of people and emotional stabilities in your audience, you're doing them a disservice. You may be communicating what's on your heart, but you're not communicating to theirs. I'm Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast, or Tell It Like It Is TV. Have a blessed day.
Loren is a master teacher on storytelling, and I learned so much. I'm really going to have to sit down and go back through everything, and I think I might have to have some more coffees with Loren, but it was totally worth my time, and I really highly recommend it if you're looking to grow your ministry, grow your business, grow your career. Loren will serve you well.